I brought her to New York. She was my best friend. Like, I brought her along for everything in my life. Like, I gave her everything, and I would do it all over again. Like, she was my best friend. And
we have the BFF podcast we have been waiting for, where Bree tells all. Now, it is currently still going on while I'm recording this, but I think I've heard everything I need to hear. I think it's about to wrap up, and I wanted to get this out to you. So let's talk about it, because I took notes. As you can see from that first clip, one of the things that stuck out to me a lot is that Bree took a lot of credit for what she did for Grace, which she brought Grace to New York. She got Grace the Barstool Sports Shop. She brought Grace onto the Plan Bree. She did this for Grace. And I quote, help Grace get a job. Quote again, we got her a job. The second thing that stood out to me is that, and I have said this is Bree's podcast. This is Bree's podcast. She started the podcast in her dorm room. Like, this is Bree's podcast. And Bree also mentioned how she started the podcast.
I joined Barstool. So I started Plan Bree probably 4.5 years ago. I started it in my college dorm room. I started it as a podcast with myself. Like, I built it from the ground up. I started it, it was like an Instagram page at first. I was posting every single day. Then I made it into like a TikTok.
I urge you to go watch this yourself, but I'm going to kind of explain why she feels like this happened with her and Grace. And essentially, in a nutshell, she's blaming it on the internet dividing the two. That it all started when the internet started taking Grace's side or Bree's side, and Grace didn't stand up for her because Grace felt like she feels like Grace thought that it was lifting Grace up, and so if she took up for Bree, it would bring her down. And that is what really started the whole divide between the two, because she didn't think Grace was standing up for her as a best friend. As well as the relationship, obviously, with Bree and Zach Bryan. She said that Grace and Zach Bryan maybe hung out 9 times at the most. And previously, she would hang out with her boyfriends and Grace all the time, to the point where Grace lived on the couch of Bree's house or apartment with one of Bree's boyfriends and her. Apparently, this all started back in May, and she ended the podcast in October, and it was Bree's decision to end the podcast. Bree also explains this right here, which is what Grace was so upset about, of bringing a version of the podcast back. She said she's not necessarily going to be on the podcast, but it's going to be a podcast with other people on it, or people talking, and she may be on it some, but it's a way for her to give her employees work. And that Grace O'Malley has the ability to take Plan Bree also and do something on her own with it as well. All in all, this should have been kept off the internet completely. When you've been friends with someone that long, it is the right thing just to keep it off the internet and, just not tear each other down. But honestly, the whole, I got Grace this, I did this for Grace, I put a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, but also I get where she's coming from. So let me know what you think in the comments.